Street vendor is mocked in luxury store until the owner recognizes his voice and cries. Walter Thompson held the tray of costume jewelry firmly with trembling hands, trying to ignore the scornful looks coming from all sides. At 73, he never imagined he would be there, in a designer store in the fanciest mall in New York City, begging for a chance to sell his handmade pieces. "Excuse me, miss," he said to the blonde saleswoman, arranging bags in a golden display case. "Could you take a look at my jewelry? They're handmade with lots of care." The young woman turned her face away in disgust, as if Walter carried some contagious disease. "Sir, you can't be here. This is a store for imported luxury items. Look for the service exit," she replied, pointing to the back of the store. Walter felt his heart tighten, but he didn't give up. He needed that money more than ever. "Please, these are special pieces. I just need 5 minutes of your attention. My wife is sick and—" "Rachel!" the saleswoman shouted to a colleague. "Call security. There's a beggar here bothering the customers." A well-dressed customer with platinum hair and expensive jewels let out a cruel laugh. "Just imagine, street vendor junk in a store like this," she said loudly so everyone could hear. "What a lack of respect for the clientele." Other employees approached, forming a circle around Walter. The old vendor felt tears burning in his eyes, but he took a deep breath and tried to maintain his dignity. "I'm not a beggar, ma'am. I'm an artisan. I've been working with jewelry for over 50 years, he said, his voice choked. 50 years making junk, laughed another employee. Walter lowered his head and began to hum an old song softly, something he always did when he felt nervous or sad. It was a habit he had since childhood, when his mother hummed that melody to calm him. "Here comes the sun, after the rain, bringing light to those who wait," he murmured, arranging the pieces on the tray with loving hands. In the store's mezzanine, behind a mirrored glass, Richard Harrison was signing important contracts when he heard the commotion downstairs. He was the owner of that luxury store chain and was reviewing the last quarter's numbers. At 55, he had built an empire in the designer accessories business, but he rarely went down to oversee the service personally. Initially, he didn't even look up from the papers. He was used to small incidents involving street vendors trying to enter his stores. Security always handled it quickly. But then he heard that voice, that melody. The pen slipped from his hand and fell to the floor with a sharp noise. Richard froze, his blood running cold in his veins. That song, it couldn't be a coincidence. Slowly, he rose from the Italian leather chair and approached the glass. Down below, an elderly man in simple clothes and a hood was humming softly while arranging jewelry on a wooden tray. Richard felt his legs weaken. His hands began to tremble uncontrollably. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. 52 years ago, a little boy sat on his father's lap in a backyard workshop. The man repaired clocks and made simple jewelry to sell at the market. When the boy cried or was scared of something, his father always sang that same song, "Here comes the sun, after the rain, bringing light to those who wait." Richard descended the marble stairs as if in a trance. His employees stepped back in surprise to see him approaching the street vendor they were expelling. "What's going on here?" he asked, trying to control his voice. "Mr. Richard, this gentleman came into the store trying to sell cheap costume jewelry," explained the manager, Patricia. "We've already called security to remove him." "Wait," said Richard, moving closer to Walter. "Let me see that costume jewelry." Walter lifted his face for the first time, revealing tired eyes but still full of life. He didn't recognize the elegant man in front of him, but felt there was something different about him. "Thank you, sir. They're simple pieces, but made with love," said Walter, offering the tray. Richard observed the costume jewelry carefully. They were indeed simple, made with basic materials, but there was something about the technique, the attention to detail, that seemed familiar to him. And then he saw it. Among the pieces there was a small, delicate brooch with a design that made his heart race. 2 entwined hands, engraved in a very specific way, with a small heart in the middle. Where did you learn to make this design?" asked Richard, picking up the brooch with trembling hands. "Oh, that one is special. said Walter, smiling for the first time. "My son created it, a long time ago. We were partners in a small workshop. He had a golden touch for designing, but he was very young. He was only 23 when—" Walter's voice faded as he saw the expression on the face of the elegant man in front of him. Richard was pale, tears streaming freely down his face. "Father," whispered Richard. Walter nearly dropped the tray. His eyes scanned the face of the man before him, searching for familiar traces beneath the years and the success that had changed that boy he once knew so much. "Richard, my son?" he murmured, disbelieving. The entire store fell silent. The employees who had been mocking moments ago now watched open-mouthed as the scene unfolded before them. Richard could no longer contain himself. He opened his arms and enveloped his father in a desperate hug, 30 years of longing and regret pouring out in tears. "Father, I searched so hard for you," sobbed Richard. "So long. I thought I'd never see you again." "My boy," whispered Walter, still trying to believe it was real. "You've grown so much. Become such an important man." The customer who had been mocking minutes earlier now hid embarrassed behind a column. The employees didn't know where to look. How are you here?" asked Richard, stepping back a little to look at his father. "Long story, son," said Walter, wiping his own eyes. "But what matters is you. Look at what you've achieved. This beautiful store, all this success." "And Mrs. Margaret?" "My mother?" asked Richard anxiously. Walter's face darkened a little. "Your mother. She passed away 15 years ago, son. Heart problems. But she died talking about you, proud of what you had become." Richard felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. His mother had passed away and he hadn't even known. "Why did you never look for me? Why did you disappear like that?" "Son, you were building your new life. You had married that rich girl, were studying business administration. We didn't want to be a burden on your journey." "A burden? You were my family." "We were poor, Richard. Very poor. After the workshop went bankrupt, after that terrible fight we had, I thought it was better this way. You had a bright future ahead of you. You didn't need a failed father getting in the way." Richard remembered the fight. It had been horrible. He, young and ambitious, wanted to expand the business, take out loans, modernize everything. His father was more cautious, preferred to grow slowly. The harsh words they exchanged that day still echoed in his head to this day. "You weren't a failure, father. You were wise. I was the arrogant and impatient boy." "Don't say that, son. Look at where you've ended up," said Walter, looking around the luxurious store. "And you, how have you been living? Where do you live?" Walter hesitated before answering. "I live in Queens, in a simple little house. After your mother passed, I married Mrs. Grace, a very good woman who took care of me when I was lost." "And are you well?" "Grace is sick, son. That's why I'm here, trying to sell my costume jewelry. She needs urgent surgery and Medicare can't do it. It's private, costs $15,000. Richard felt the world spin. His father, at 73 years old, was going from store to store trying to raise money to save his wife, while he, a millionaire, had no idea what was happening. $15,000? asked Richard, almost laughing with relief. "Dad, that's nothing. I'll pay for the surgery right now." "No, son," said Walter, shaking his head. "I didn't come here to ask for charity. I came to work to sell my product. It's not charity, Dad. It's family taking care of family. I can't accept your money like that, Richard. I have my pride." Richard looked at his father and saw where he had inherited his stubbornness. The same pride that had separated them was now trying to separate them again. "Then let's do it differently," said Richard, picking up the entwined hands brooch again. "Do you still make costume jewelry of this quality?" "Yes, I do. It's what I know how to do best." "Then I have a proposal. I want you to work with me. For real. As a partner." "Partner? Son, you own a chain of luxury stores. I'm an old man who makes costume jewelry in a backyard." "Exactly. And this market is asking for authenticity, unique pieces, handmade. You can teach my artisans your techniques, develop a special line, real craftsmanship with a story." Walter looked at his son with shining eyes. "Are you serious?" "I've never been more serious in my life. But first, let's take care of Mrs. Grace. Patricia," called Richard. The manager approached, still in shock from everything she had witnessed. "Yes, Mr. Richard. Cancel my appointments for today and arrange a transfer of $20,000 to—" Richard looked at his father. "Give me Mrs. Grace's full name and bank details." "Grace Sullivan," said Walter, still reluctant. "But son, I only need 15,000. The other 5,000 are for you to take care of yourself too. When was the last time you had a full checkup?" Walter smiled, recognizing in his son the same concern he had always had. "It's been too long," he admitted. "Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. While Patricia arranged the transfer, Richard took his father to his office in the mezzanine. It was a sophisticated environment, with designer furniture and a panoramic view of the mall. Walter felt out of place there, but Richard made a point of making him feel comfortable. "Sit here, Dad. Let's talk properly." Walter settled into a leather armchair, still holding his tray of costume jewelry as if it were his most precious possession. "Tell me everything that happened after you left," said Richard. "It's a long story, son. I have all the time in the world to listen." Walter took a deep breath and began to recount. After the fight in the workshop, he and Margaret were devastated. The bankruptcy of the business had been a huge blow, and the harsh words exchanged with their son made everything even worse. They decided to move far away so Richard could get on with his life without feeling obligated to help them. "It was the hardest decision of my life," said Walter. "But we thought it was the right thing. You were engaged to Catherine, were about to start college. You had a bright future ahead. And where did you go?" "First to Newark, then to Jersey City. I got a job in an auto parts factory. Your mother did sewing from home. It wasn't much, but it was enough to get by. And did you keep making costume jewelry?" "Not for a while. It got too hard. But later, when your mother got sick for the first time, I started making some small pieces again to sell at the fairs. It was extra income that helped a lot." Richard listened to every word carefully, trying to imagine the difficult life his parents had led while he was building his empire. "And after Mom?" "After she passed, I was lost, son. Completely lost. That's when I met Grace. She was a nurse at the hospital where your mother spent her last days. A very good woman, very caring. She helped me through the grief." "And you got married?" "Yes, we did. I was 58. She was 45. She had a daughter from her first marriage, Christine, a very special girl who treated me like a father from day one." Richard felt a twinge of jealousy and curiosity at the same time. He had a half-sister he didn't even know. "How old is she now?" 25. She's a teacher at a public school in the Bronx, a hard-working woman just like her mother." "And Mrs. Grace, how did she get sick?" "Diabetes, son. It started about 5 years ago, but now it's gotten complicated. She needs urgent foot surgery or she could lose it." Richard felt a tightness in his chest. While he lived in luxury, his family faced serious health problems due to lack of money. "Dad, I want to meet Mrs. Grace and Christine. May I?" "Of course you may, son. They'll be very happy. Grace always said that one day you'd come back into our lives. She's one of those people who believe in miracles." "And it seems she was right," said Richard, smiling. At that moment, Patricia knocked on the office door. "Mr. Richard, the transfer has been made, and there's a young lady downstairs asking for a Mr. Walter Thompson." "That must be Christine," said Walter, standing up quickly. "She always gets worried when I take too long to come back." "Send her up," Richard told Patricia. A few minutes later, a young woman with brown hair and sweet eyes appeared at the office door. She wore simple clothes but was neatly dressed, with a teacher's bag in her hand. "Dad, you gave me such a scare," she said, entering the office. "I was waiting for you downstairs and—" She stopped when she saw Richard. It was clear she knew who he was. "Christine, I want you to meet my son, Richard," said Walter, pride in his voice. Your son," she stammered. "Richard? That Richard?" "The very one," Walter confirmed. Richard stood up, and extended his hand to his half-sister. "Nice to meet you, Christine. Dad told me a lot about you." I always wanted to meet you," she said, shaking his hand timidly. "Dad always spoke of you with so much pride. Even after everything that happened? Especially after everything that happened, he always said you were brave, determined, that you'd achieve everything you wanted in life." Richard looked at his father, moved. "And he was right," said Christine, looking around the luxurious office. "Wow, what an amazing place." "Sit here with us," said Richard. "We want to know all about you, too." Christine told them about her life as a teacher, the challenges of working in a public school, and how Walter had been a second father to her. She also spoke about her concern for her mother and how the whole family was distressed about the surgery. "But that's not a problem anymore," said Richard. "The money has been transferred. Mrs. Grace can have the surgery whenever she wants." Christine looked at Walter, confused. "What do you mean?" "Your brother here wants to help with your mother's surgery," Walter explained. "Brother?" Christine smiled, liking the word. "That's amazing. Mom always said that someday you two would meet again." "She can have the surgery wherever she wants," said Richard. "Private hospital, with the best doctor we can find." "I don't know how to thank you," said Christine with tears in her eyes. "No need to thank me. It's family taking care of family," repeated Richard, the phrase he had said to his father. They spent the rest of the afternoon talking, catching up on lost years. Richard discovered that his father had followed his professional journey from afar, reading news about his companies in the newspapers. "Dad always kept the newspaper clippings where you appeared," told Christine. "There's a whole folder at home." "You kept clippings of me?" asked Richard, moved. "Everyone I found," admitted Walter. "It was my way of keeping up with your life. I felt proud when I saw your stores opening, when you won awards. Why did you never look for me? Because you were doing well, son. You were building your life. I didn't want to interfere. But, Dad, I needed you. After I separated from Catherine, I was completely alone. I built all this," said Richard, gesturing to the office, "but had no family to share it with." "You separated from Catherine?" asked Walter, surprised. "It's been 12 years. She wanted children. I was too focused on work. We ended up drifting apart. And since then my life has been nothing but work, work and more work." "Children," murmured Walter with sadness. "I dreamed of being a grandfather." "You still can be," said Richard. "It's never too late to start over." Richard looked at his half-sister. "And you, Christine, boyfriend, husband?" "I have a boyfriend," she said, blushing a little. "Brandon. He's also a teacher. We've been together for 3 years. I want to meet him, and I want to meet Mrs. Grace too. Can we go visit them today?" "Of course," said Christine, excited. "Mom will be overjoyed." Walter still seemed worried about something. "Son, about that job proposal you made, were you really serious?" "Couldn't be more serious. In fact, I've been thinking for months about creating a line of handmade pieces. The market is asking for it, unique products with a story made by hand. You would be perfect to lead this project." "But I don't understand anything about business, son. I don't know how to use a computer. I don't know marketing. Dad, you don't need to understand business. For that, I have a team. What I need is someone who truly understands craftsmanship, who can pass on traditional techniques to other artisans. You would be our master craftsman." "Master craftsman," repeated Walter, liking the sound of the word. "And there's more," continued Richard. "I want you to set up a workshop right here, on the floor above the store. Customers will be able to see the creation process of the pieces, understand the work that goes into each one." "That would be amazing," said Christine. "Dad always dreamed of having a large workshop with space to teach others." "Then it's decided," said Richard. "But first, let's take care of Mrs. Grace's surgery. Then we'll plan everything properly." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. When they went down to the store, the atmosphere was completely different. The employees who had previously mocked Walter now greeted him respectfully, knowing he was the boss's father. Richard, however, was not satisfied with this. "Everyone, I want to talk to all of you," he said, gathering the employees. Patricia, the saleswomen, and the security staff approached, some clearly embarrassed by what had happened. "What happened here today was unacceptable," began Richard. "I'm not just talking about how you treated my father. I'm talking about how you treated a human being." The employees lowered their heads. "It doesn't matter if a person is rich or poor, young or old, well-dressed or poorly dressed. Everyone deserves to be treated with respect and dignity. This is how I want my company to operate." "Mr. Richard, we didn't know," began Patricia. "Didn't know what? That he was my father, and if he weren't, would your behavior have been acceptable?" General silence. "You will all undergo training in compassionate service, all of you. And I want it made clear to every employee in every store. Here, we treat people well, no matter who they are." "Yes, sir," they replied in unison. "And one more thing," continued Richard. "My father will be working with us. We're launching a line of luxury handmade jewelry. He will be our creative consultant and master artisan. I expect him to receive the same respect you would give any other executive in the company." The employees agreed, some still visibly ashamed of their earlier behavior. Richard, Walter, and Christine left the store together. Outside, Walter took a deep breath. "Son, you were a bit harsh with them, don't you think?" "Dad, sometimes you have to be tough for people to learn. They won't mistreat another customer ever again." "You're right," said Christine. "People need to learn to respect others." They rode in Richard's car to Walter and Grace's house in Queens. It was a simple neighborhood with small houses and narrow streets. Their home was modest but well kept, with a small garden in front and blue grills on the windows. "This is it," said Walter with some embarrassment. "What a cozy home," said Richard sincerely. When they entered, Grace was sitting in a living room armchair, her bandaged foot propped on a cushion. She was a sweet-looking woman with greying hair tied in a low bun. When she saw Richard come in, her eyes filled with tears. "My God, it's really him," she murmured. "Grace, I want you to meet my son, Richard," said Walter with evident pride in his voice. Richard approached and respectfully kissed Grace's hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Grace. Dad has told me many things about you. All good, I hope," she said, smiling through her tears. "Only wonderful things. And Mrs. Grace, I want you to know that we're going to take care of this surgery. Tomorrow, if you'd like." "But how—" "It's all settled," said Christine, sitting next to her mother. "Richard transferred the money today." Grace looked at Richard with infinite gratitude. "My son, I don't know how to thank you." "No need to thank me, Mrs. Grace. You took care of my father when he needed it most. Now it's our turn to take care of you." They spent the rest of the afternoon in the simple house, but Richard felt more at home there than in his luxury apartment in the Upper East Side. Grace had prepared a simple coffee with homemade cake and sugar bread. It was the first family meal Richard had had in years. "Tell us about your life, son," said Grace. "Walter always talks about you, but we want to hear it from you yourself." Richard told them about his professional journey, about how he had started small after his parents' separation and built his empire store by store. But he also spoke about the loneliness, about how professional success hadn't filled the void of his lost family. "Dad, I want to confess something," Richard said at one point. "These 30 years away from you were the worst of my life. No matter how successful I became, I always felt like something important was missing." "We missed you every day too," said Walter. "Not a day went by that I didn't think of you." "Then why did you never look for me? Why did you never try to call me, send me a letter?" Walter and Grace exchanged glances. "Actually, son, we tried a few times," admitted Grace. "What do you mean?" "Your father tried to find you several times over the years," she continued, "but he always gave up before managing to speak with you." "Why?" "Because I was afraid you wouldn't want to see us," said Walter. "You were so successful, had such a different life from ours. I was afraid our presence would interfere with your happiness." "My happiness?" Richard almost laughed. "Dad, what happiness? I have money, I have professional success, but I don't have a family. I have no one to share anything I've achieved with." "We didn't know that, son," said Grace softly. "From the newspapers. You always seemed so well, so accomplished." "The newspapers don't show the loneliness," said Richard. "They don't show the nights I lay awake thinking of you, wondering if you were okay, if you were happy. Christine approached her brother and held his hand. "Now you don't have to be alone anymore," she said. "We have a family here that really wants to be part of your life." "If you want to, that is," said Walter, still unsure. "If I want to?" Richard hugged his father again. "Dad, it's all I want most in the world." They talked until late at night. Richard learned a lot about the life his parents had led, about the difficulties they had faced, but also about the happy moments they had shared. Grace showed him the folder with newspaper clippings that Walter kept, all talking about Richard's success. "Look at this," she said, opening a yellowed page. "When you won the Businessman of the Year award, your father spent a whole week showing it to everyone at the market." "You went to the market?" asked Richard. "Yes, we did," said Walter. "I kept making some jewelry to sell there on weekends. It was extra income that helped a lot." "And people liked your work?" "Yes, they did. There was always a line at my stall. People said my pieces were different, that they had quality." Richard smiled, confirming his intuition about creating the artisanal line. "Dad, I'm more and more convinced that our partnership is going to work out very well." The next day, Richard accompanied Grace to the most highly regarded private hospital in the city. The orthopedic doctor who examined her confirmed that the surgery was urgent, but that with the proper procedure, she would recover completely. "We can do the surgery as early as tomorrow," said the doctor. "We have an opening in the schedule." "Perfect," said Richard. "Do everything necessary. The best possible treatment." While Grace was having her pre-operative tests, Richard took the opportunity to talk with Walter about their professional plans. "Dad, I need to get to know your work better. Do you want to show me your workshop at home?" "Of course, son. But it's very simple, you know. It's nothing compared to your stores." When they arrived at the house, Walter took Richard to the backyard, where he had set up a small workshop in a covered area. It was indeed simple, but extremely organized. It had wooden workbenches, old but well cared-for tools, and hundreds of small jars with various materials. "I work here every day," said Walter, stroking one of the workbenches. "This workbench here, I made it myself. I've been using it for over 20 years. Richard observed the tools, many of which he recognized from the workshop they had together decades ago. "Some of these tools I remember from our old workshop," he said. "They're the same," Walter confirmed. "I managed to save some things when we closed. I never had the heart to get rid of them." Richard picked up a small, fine-nosed pliers. "This one. You taught me how to use it when I was 10. "You really remember?" Walter smiled, moved. "I remember everything, Dad. I remember you teaching me to make the first wires, to polish the pieces, to choose the materials. You were a very smart boy. You learned fast. And you were a very patient teacher." They spent the whole morning in the workshop. Walter showed Richard some of the techniques he had developed over the years, tricks for special finishes, ways of working with simple materials to create sophisticated effects. "Dad, this is incredible," said Richard, looking at a bracelet his father had made. "How do you get this golden effect?" "Family secret," said Walter, winking. "I'll teach you everything again, like old times." "I want to learn, Dad. I want our new workshop to have all these traditional techniques." "Our workshop," Walter repeated, liking the sound of the words. At that moment, Christine appeared at the workshop door. "Sorry to interrupt, but there's a phone call. The doctor wants to speak with you." They hurried into the house. The doctor explained that all of Grace's tests were normal and that the surgery could proceed the next day. "Great news," said Richard. "We'll be there to give our full support." After hanging up, Grace held Richard's hand. "My son, I still can't believe all this is happening. It feels like a dream." "It's not a dream, Mrs. Grace. It's a second chance that life is giving our family. You know, I always had faith that one day you would find each other again," she said. "I always told Walter that God would prepare the right moment, and he did," said Richard. "If I hadn't been at the store exactly at that time, if Dad hadn't sung that song—" "That special song," said Walter. "It was our song, from our original family. And now it will be our new family's song too," said Christine. That night, Richard slept at his parents' house for the first time in 30 years. Grace had insisted that he stay in Christine's room, while she slept on the living room sofa. "I won't let you go back to that empty apartment today," she said. "Family has to stick together during important times." Richard gladly accepted. He was anxious about Grace's surgery, but at the same time happy to be back in the family fold. On the day of the surgery, Richard, Walter, and Christine arrived early at the hospital. The surgery lasted 3 hours, but the doctor came out of the operating room with good news. "Everything went perfectly," he said. "In 2 weeks, she'll be walking normally. In a month, it will be as if she never had any problem." Walter cried with relief. Richard held his father, moved to see how much he loved Grace. "Now she's going to be okay, Dad. You'll have many happy years ahead." During Grace's recovery days in the hospital, Richard took the opportunity to plan the new line of handmade jewelry. He hired a team of designers to work with Walter, rented a space on the upper floor of the main store to set up the workshop, and began developing the concept for the new brand. "Let's call it Entwined Hands," suggested Richard, "like that brooch that brought us together again." "I like the name," said Walter. "It speaks of family, unity, working together." "Exactly." Richard also made sure to include Christine in the project. "I want you to be our educational coordinator," he said to his half-sister. "Educational coordinator?" she asked, confused. "We're going to create workshops to teach the traditional techniques to others. I want you to develop the educational program. With your experience as a teacher, you're the perfect person. But I don't know anything about jewelry." "You don't need to know about jewelry. You need to know about teaching. Dad will teach the techniques. You'll teach how to teach." Christine was delighted with the proposal. "Can I continue teaching at school too?" "Of course, you can work with us part-time on weekends however you want." When Grace was discharged from the hospital, the Entwined Hands workshop was almost ready. Richard had invested a lot of money in quality equipment, but maintained the handmade concept that was his father's specialty. "Son, this is incredible," said Walter, looking at the new workshop. "It's much better than I ever dreamed." The workshop had several individual workbenches, a space for demonstrations, a sales area, and even a small museum with antique tools and the history of Brazilian craftsmanship. "Dad, I want you to hire other artisans to work with us, people who truly understand the craft, who have traditional techniques to teach." "I know several people," said Walter, excited. "Old Jack, who works with filigree. Mrs. Rachel, who does metal crochet. Anthony, who is a leather specialist." "Perfect. We'll assemble a team of the best artisans in New York City." The first Entwined Hands collection was launched 3 months after the reunion. Richard organized a special event at the store, inviting VIP clients, specialized press, and fashion influencers. The collection was a perfect blend of traditional techniques and contemporary design. Each piece had a story, a specific technique, and was accompanied by a certificate explaining the creative process. "Ladies and gentlemen," said Richard into the microphone during the launch, "this is not just a jewelry collection. It's a collection of stories, traditions, and family love." He told the guests the story of reuniting with his father, how it all started with a mocked street vendor in a luxury store. "My father taught me that true luxury isn't in the price of things, but in the love and care we put into them," said Richard, moved. At the end of the event, Walter was called to the stage. He looked elegant, wearing a suit that Richard had specially made for him. "I want to thank all of you for being here today," said Walter into the microphone, his voice trembling. "But mostly, I want to thank my son, who gave me a second chance, who turned the pain of separation into the joy of reunion." The audience was moved. Many people cried upon hearing the real story behind the collection. The pieces sold out in 2 hours. Richard had to open a waiting list for the next batches. "Dad, we're a success," he said, hugging Walter. "We're a family," corrected his father. Grace, now fully recovered, was radiant seeing her husband receive the recognition he deserved. Christine had organized the first educational workshops, which were also an absolute success. "You know what's the most amazing thing about all this?" Grace said to Richard in a private conversation. "It's not the professional success, it's seeing Walter happy again. I hadn't seen that sparkle in his eyes for years." "Was he sad?" "Not sad, but incomplete. I always felt that a part of his heart was with you. Now he's whole again." Richard felt a tightness in his chest, realizing how much suffering his absence had caused. "Mrs. Grace, I'm sorry for all those lost years. Don't be, my son. What matters is that you found each other when it was meant to be. If you had met earlier, perhaps you wouldn't have been ready to value family as you do now." "You're right. And now when are you going to give us a grandchild?" she asked, smiling. "Mrs. Grace," Richard laughed, blushing. "I'm serious. You're 55. There's still time to start a family. First, I need to learn to be a son again. Then we'll think about grandchildren." 6 months after the launch of the first collection, Entwined Hands had become the most successful line in Richard's company. They had opened 3 new workshops in New York City and were planning expansion to other cities. Walter had become a celebrity in the craft world. He gave interviews to specialized magazines, participated in international fairs, and had even written a book on traditional jewelry techniques. "Son, sometimes I can't believe all this is happening," he said to Richard during a family lunch. "Believe me, Dad, you deserve all this and much more. You know what makes me happiest? It's not the success. It's not the money. It's working with you again. It's having my son back." Richard had also changed a lot. He spent less time at the office and more time in the workshop, relearning the techniques his father had taught him in childhood. He had rediscovered his passion for hands-on work, for direct contact with creation. "Christine, how are the educational workshops going?" asked Richard during lunch. "Very well. We have a 3-month waiting list. People are very interested in learning traditional techniques." "And Brandon, how is he handling all these family changes?" "He's loving it," said Christine, smiling. "He even wants to learn some techniques to make pieces for me." "Bring him over for dinner on Sunday," said Richard. "I want to get to know my future brother-in-law better." "Future brother-in-law?" asked Christine, blushing. "You've been together for 3 years. Isn't it time to think about marriage?" "Richard," protested Christine, but she was smiling. "Leave the girl alone," said Grace, laughing. "But I also think it's time—" Walter watched the gathered family with shining eyes. After so many years apart, he had his son back, a daughter-in-law he adored, a stepdaughter he considered his own, and even the prospect of becoming a grandfather soon. "Do you know what day it is today?" he asked suddenly. "What day?" the others asked. "It's exactly 1 year since I entered that store selling costume jewelry. Everyone was moved by the coincidence." "1 year," murmured Richard. "How life can change in a year." "In a day," corrected Walter. "Life can change in just 1 day." "Dad is right," said Grace. "If he hadn't had the courage to enter that store on that specific day—" "If I hadn't been there at that specific time," continued Richard. "If Daddy hadn't sung that song," added Christine. "I think it was fate," said Grace. "Some things are bigger than us." Richard looked at the family gathered around the simple table in the house in Queens. He could be in a 5-star restaurant, but he preferred to be there in that cozy environment with those people he loved. "Do you know what I've learned this year?" he said. "What?" the others asked. "That real success isn't having money. It's having someone to share life with. It's having family. And that family isn't just those born to us," added Grace, looking affectionately at Christine and Richard. "It's those we choose to love and who choose to love us back." That night after dinner, Richard and Walter returned to the house's workshop. The father was teaching his son a new wire intertwining technique. "You have to be patient," Walter was saying. "Each wire has to be placed in the exact position, otherwise the piece won't be firm." "Like family," said Richard, focused on his work. "Like family. Each person has to be in the right position, otherwise the family won't be firm." Walter smiled at the comparison. "You've always been a philosopher since you were little. I learned from the best teacher." They worked in silence for a while, each lost in their thoughts. Richard thought about how his father's rough hands had created so much beauty over the years, how he had underestimated the value of artisanal work. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Of course, son." "Do you regret anything? All those years we spent apart?" Walter stopped working and looked at his son. "Son, regret is a very heavy feeling to carry. I prefer to think that everything happened as it had to happen. But they were 30 lost years. They weren't lost. You used those years to build everything you have today. I used it to learn to value family, to take care of Grace and Christine. We became better people because of this separation. Do you really think so? I do. If we hadn't separated, would you have built this empire? Would I have learned to love again? Would our family be as close as it is today? Richard reflected on his father's words. Perhaps you're right. I'm sure I am. Sometimes life separates us only to bring us together even stronger. Like the threads of this bracelet, said Richard, showing the work he was doing. Exactly like the threads of this bracelet. The following Sunday, Brandon came to dinner at the family's house. He was a simple young man, a teacher like Christine, but with a generous heart and a genuine passion for education. Nice to meet you, Richard, he said, shaking his brother-in-law's hand. Christine talks about you so much that I feel like we already know each other. The pleasure is mine, Brandon. Christine talks a lot about you, too. During dinner, Richard observed how Brandon treated Christine with affection and respect, how he naturally joined the family conversation, how he helped Grace in the kitchen without being asked. Brandon, Christine told me you're also a teacher, said Richard. Yes, I am. I teach history at a public school in the Bronx. And what do you think of our proposal for educational workshops? I think it's fantastic. The kids at my school would love to learn these traditional techniques. It's a way to connect them with American culture. What an interesting idea, said Richard thoughtfully. We could bring the workshops to public schools. That would be amazing, said Christine, excited. I'll think of a way to make this happen, said Richard. Walter, who had been quietly observing, suddenly spoke up. Brandon, may I ask you a personal question? Of course, Mr. Walter. What are your intentions with my daughter? Dad, protested Christine, red with embarrassment. It's okay, said Brandon, smiling. It's a fair question. Mr. Walter, I love Christine and plan to marry her as soon as we save up for a simple celebration. Brandon! Now it was Christine's turn to be surprised. What? It's true, he said, taking her hand. We've been together for 3 years. We already live together. Our parents already know each other. All that's left is to make it official. Richard smiled, seeing the happiness on his half-sister's face. No simple celebration, he said. If my sister is getting married, it will be with a celebration worthy of her. Richard, you don't have to, began Christine. Yes, I do. It's a Thompson family tradition to throw beautiful celebrations for the children. What tradition is that? Asked Walter, laughing. A tradition I'm creating right now, replied Richard. Grace clapped her hands, moved. We're going to have a wedding in the family. From that Sunday on, the house was bustling with wedding preparations. Richard made sure to organize everything from choosing the church to the reception hall. I want it to be special, he said to Christine. You're my only sister. You deserve the best. But Richard, you're exaggerating. You're going to spend a fortune. Christine, let me explain something to you. For 30 years, I accumulated money without anyone to spend it on. Now I have family. I have someone to share it with. Let me do this for you, please. Christine was moved by her brother's words. All right. But nothing too over the top. Agreed? Agreed, lied Richard, who was already planning an unforgettable celebration. Christine and Brandon's wedding took place 6 months later, in a historic church in downtown New York City, followed by a reception in an elegant yet cozy hall. Richard hired the best vendors, but maintained a family-friendly and intimate atmosphere. I can't believe all this is happening, Christine said to Richard during the reception as they danced together. Believe it, you deserve all this and much more. You know what's the best part? It's not the beautiful party. It's not the expensive gifts. It's about having family to share this moment. I know exactly what you mean. During the party, Walter gave an emotional speech. My friends, my family, he said into the microphone. Today is a very special day, not only because my daughter Christine is marrying Brandon, who is a wonderful young man, but also because our family is complete again. He looked at Richard, who was at the main table. 2 years ago, I was an old street vendor trying to sell costume jewelry in a luxury store. Today I have my son back. I have a son-in-law I love like a son, and I'm sure I'll be a grandfather soon. Dad, protested Christine, laughing. What I'm trying to say is that life always gives us second chances. Sometimes it takes time, sometimes we think we missed the train. But if we don't give up, if we keep trying, a new opportunity always comes along. The audience applauded emotionally. That's why I want to make a toast, continued Walter, raising his glass. To second chances, to families reuniting, and to love that always wins in the end. To second chances, everyone shouted, raising their glasses. Richard was crying with emotion. He looked around the hall and saw Grace radiant, Christine and Brandon happy, friends and colleagues celebrating. It was exactly the family he had always dreamed of having. After the party, when everyone had left, the family gathered at the house in Queens for one last coffee, before Christine and Brandon left for their honeymoon. "Where are you going again?" asked Richard. "Miami Beach," replied Brandon. "A simple beach inn." "Simple." Richard looked at Grace. "Mrs. Grace, you let them book a simple inn for their honeymoon?" "They chose it," defended Grace. "Brandon, give me the reservation details," said Richard. "Why?" "I'm going to cancel it and make a new reservation. Somewhere more romantic." "Richard, you don't have to." "Yes, I do. Honeymoon happens once in a lifetime." In the end, Richard managed to cancel the simple inn reservation and booked a suite at a 5-star resort in Miami Beach, including a special breakfast, couples massage, and romantic dinner on the beach. "You're impossible," said Christine, hugging her brother. "I am, and you'll have to get used to it." The next morning, when Christine and Brandon left for their honeymoon, Richard stayed having coffee with his parents. "Son, you've been very generous lately," observed Grace. "How so?" "The wedding, the honeymoon, all these gifts you've been giving. Is there a problem?" "There's no problem," said Walter, "but we're worried you might be spending too much." Richard laughed at his parents' concern. "Dad, Mrs. Grace, do you know how much I earn per month?" "I have no idea," admitted Walter. Richard told them his monthly income, which was truly impressive. "My God," murmured Grace. "And you lived alone with all that?" "I did, and it was the emptiest life in the world. Now that I have you, I can finally enjoy what I've achieved. But son, we don't want you spending money on us," said Walter. "Dad, let me explain something to you. You're not an expense. You're an investment in my happiness." "What a beautiful thing to say," said Grace, moved. "It's true. Since you came back into my life, I sleep better, wake up more energized, work with more pleasure. That's priceless." Walter held his son's hand. "We're happier too, son. Much happier." That afternoon, Richard went to visit the Entwined Hands workshop that had become an absolute success. The team of artisans had grown to 15 people, all specialists in different traditional techniques. "How are sales, Patricia?" he asked the manager, who now also handled the artisanal line. "Historical records, Mr. Richard. The waiting list is 4 months long. And we have requests from stores in other countries wanting to resell our pieces." "Which countries? United States, France, Japan?" "It seems Brazilian craftsmanship is highly valued abroad." Richard smiled, proud of the success they had built together. "And how is my father? Has he adapted well to the new routine?" "Perfectly. The other artisans respect him greatly. They say your Walter has golden hands. He always did. He just needed recognition." Richard went up to the workshop and found his father teaching a complex filigree technique to 2 younger artisans. "Look, you have to be very careful in this part," Walter was saying. "The wire is very delicate. If you force it too much, it breaks." "And if it breaks?" asked one of the apprentices. "If it breaks, you start all over. Some things can't be fixed, only restarted." Richard watched from afar, impressed by his father's patience and wisdom. At 74, Walter had become a respected master, a guardian of techniques that were being lost. "How is the new group?" asked Richard, approaching. "Very good," replied Walter. "These 2 here have skilled hands and a strong desire to learn." "And Christine's educational workshops?" "Also going very well. Even on her honeymoon, she left everything organized for the next 2 weeks." Richard smiled, proud of his sister's organization. "Dad, can I speak with you privately?" "Of course, son." They went to the small room Richard had set up for Walter in the workshop. It was a cozy space with a drafting table, a comfortable armchair, and a bookshelf full of books on craftsmanship. "Dad, I want to make a proposal to you." "What kind of proposal?" "I want you to be an official partner in the company, not just for the entwined hands line, but for everything." Walter was surprised. "Partner? Son, I don't understand anything about administration, sales, all these modern things." "Dad, you don't need to understand. For that, I have managers. What I need is someone from the family, someone I trust completely, to be my real partner." "But son, this is your company. You built it all alone." "I built it alone because I had no family. Now I do, and I want to share everything with you. I don't know what to say." "Say you accept, with one condition." "What condition?" "That you teach me all the techniques you know again. I want to work with my hands again like in the old days." Walter smiled, moved. "I accept both proposals, to be your partner and to be your teacher again." They hugged, closing another cycle of reconciliation. "Dad, there's one more thing." "What?" "I want you and Mrs. Grace to come live with me." "Live with you?" "I have a huge apartment in the Upper East Side with 4 bedrooms. It's practically empty. It would be much better if you lived there." Walter hesitated. "Son, we like our little house in Queens." "You can keep the house too. It would be like a country house. But for daily life it would be more practical to live near the workshop." "And Grace? She's very settled in the neighborhood. She has friends there." "She can keep visiting her friends whenever she wants, and she'll make new friends in the building. There's a great community area there." Walter promised to talk to Grace about the proposal. That evening during dinner, Walter told his wife about Richard's proposals. "Partnership in the company and moving to the apartment," he summarized. "What do you think?" asked Grace. "About the partnership, I like it. It feels good to be a real part of my son's business. About the move, I'm not sure." "I think it would be good," said Grace, surprising her husband. "That apartment is too big for him alone, and it would be nice to have family nearby." "You'd be willing to leave our home?" "Our home will still be ours. It would just be a temporary move to try it out." "So, you think we should accept?" "I do. Richard needs family, and we also like being close to him." The next day they informed Richard of the decision, and he was overjoyed. "That's great. I'll arrange the move today." "Easy there, son," Walter chuckled. "Let us get our things in order first." "How long do you need?" "A week," said Grace. "A week? But that's too long." Walter and Grace laughed at Richard's eagerness. "Son, a move isn't done overnight," Grace explained. "All right, but no more than a week." The parents' move to Richard's apartment became a family affair. Christine and Brandon cut their honeymoon short just to help with the arrangements. "How was Miami Beach?" Richard asked his sister. "Amazing. That resort you booked was a dream. Thank you again." "You're welcome. The wedding and honeymoon have to be unforgettable." Richard's apartment was truly enormous. Besides the 4 bedrooms, it had a spacious living room, an open-plan kitchen, a laundry area, and a balcony overlooking Central Park. "My God, what a beautiful place," said Grace, taking in the view. "It'll be even more beautiful with you here," Richard replied. Grace chose the room with a view of the park. Walter set up a small workbench on the balcony so he could make jewelry while enjoying the scenery. "Son, are you sure we won't be in your way?" Grace asked. "Mrs. Sullivan, you'll only improve my life. This apartment was too quiet, too empty." "And what if you want to bring a girlfriend over?" Walter asked with a wink. "Dad?" Richard blushed. "It's a valid question," Walter insisted. "You're 55, handsome, successful. Why don't you have a girlfriend?" "Because until now, I didn't have time for dating, I only worked." "And now?" Grace inquired. "Now I'll have more time. With you as my partner, I can share the responsibilities." "So, will you look for a girlfriend?" Walter pressed. "If someone special comes along, why not?" "Great," said Grace. "I'll keep an eye out for candidates." "Mrs. Sullivan." "What?" "I want grandchildren, of course." Richard laughed at his parents' eagerness for grandchildren. "First, let me get used to having a family again. Then we can think about expanding." Family life in the Upper East Side apartment turned out better than anyone had imagined. Richard discovered the joy of coming home to someone, having company for dinner, and sharing the small daily moments. Grace took care of the house lovingly, cooked the meals Richard liked but always respected his space and independence. Walter had turned the balcony into a small workshop where he created special pieces on weekends or when he wanted to relax. "Son, has your life changed much since we reunited?" Grace asked one evening during dinner. "Completely," Richard answered, "for the better in every way." "How so?" "Before, I worked just to work, out of habit. Now I work with pleasure because I know I have a family to come home to at the end of the day." "And the workshop? Do you enjoy working on crafts again?" "I love it. It's like I've rediscovered a part of me that was lost for 30 years. "That's wonderful, son. We're very happy too." That night, after his parents had gone to sleep, Richard stayed on the balcony watching the city. He thought about how drastically his life had changed in just 2 years. From a lonely, successful businessman, he had become a son, brother, brother-in-law, and partner in a family business. The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. "Richard," it was Christine. "Hi, Christine. Is everything okay?" "I have some news to share." "What news?" "I'm pregnant." Richard nearly dropped the phone. "Pregnant? Are you sure?" "Absolutely. I took 3 tests, all positive. And I've already seen the doctor." "Christine, what wonderful news. Congratulations." "Thank you. But please don't tell Dad and Grace yet. I want to tell them in person." "Of course. When are you coming here?" "Tomorrow at dinner. We'll share the news with the whole family together." Richard hung up the phone, beaming. He was going to be an uncle. Finally, he would have a nephew or niece to spoil. The next day, Christine and Brandon arrived for dinner looking like they were hiding something. Grace, who was very observant, noticed right away. "Christine, you look different today," she said. "Different how?" "More beautiful, more radiant. And you have good color." Christine and Brandon exchanged glances, smiling. "Actually, we have some news to share," said Brandon. "What news?" asked Walter. "We're having a baby," said Christine, no longer able to contain her excitement. The silence that followed lasted only a few seconds but felt eternal. Then Grace screamed with joy and hugged her daughter. Walter was frozen with emotion, tears in his eyes. "Baby," he murmured. "I'm going to be a grandfather." "Yes, Dad," said Christine, hugging her father. "And I'm going to be a grandmother," shouted Grace, dancing around the room. Richard watched the scene with emotion. In 2 years, his family had grown from 0 to 5 people, and now the 6th member was coming. "Congratulations, brother-in-law," he said, hugging Brandon. "And congratulations, little sister," he said, hugging Christine. "Uncle Richard," she said, smiling. "Do you like the sound?" "I love the sound." Dinner turned into an impromptu party. Grace called her friends to share the news. Walter was already making plans to teach crafts to his grandchild. "If it's a boy, I'll teach him metalworking," he said. "If it's a girl, I'll teach her embroidery." "Dad, what if she wants to work with metal?" asked Christine. "Then I'll teach her metalworking. A woman can do anything a man can." "That's right, father-in-law," said Brandon, approving. "When is the baby due?" asked Richard. "Next May," replied Christine. "May," Richard calculated. "I'll be an uncle in my birthday month." "What better gift?" said Grace. That night, after Christine and Brandon had left, the family stayed in the living room talking about the future baby. "Son, do you realize how our family is growing?" said Walter. "I do, and I love it." "Soon we'll need a bigger house," joked Grace. "We can buy a bigger house," said Richard, taking the joke seriously. "Son, this apartment is already huge," laughed Walter, "but a house would be better for the baby. With a yard, a recreation area." "Are you serious?" asked Grace. "I am. We can look for a nice house, in a good neighborhood, with space for everyone." "What about the proximity to the workshop?" "We'll manage. The important thing is to have space for the family to grow." Grace and Walter exchanged glances, surprised by Richard's willingness to make more changes. "Are you sure?" asked Walter. "Absolutely. In fact, I've been thinking about it for a while. I always dreamed of having a house with a yard, but it didn't make sense to live alone in a big house. And now it makes sense? Now it makes perfect sense." In the following months, Richard started looking for suitable houses for the family. He wanted something spacious but cozy, with a yard for the future grandchild to play in, and space for Walter to set up a larger workshop. He found the perfect house in Westchester, a single-story house with 4 bedrooms, a spacious living room, a modern kitchen, a yard with a pool and an annex that could be converted into a workshop. "What do you think?" he asked, showing the photos to his parents. "Beautiful," said Grace, "but very expensive, I imagine." "The price is the least of it. The important thing is that you like it." "We do like it," said Walter. "Especially this annex here. It would make an incredible workshop." "So, shall we see it in person?" When they visited the house, everyone fell in love with it immediately. It was exactly what they were looking for, spacious but cozy, modern but with character. "This house seems made for our family," said Grace. "Then let's buy it," decided Richard. The move to the new house happened when Christine was in her 5th month of pregnancy. She was already starting to show her belly and was radiant with happiness. "What a beautiful house, bro," she said, visiting the new house. "This room here would be perfect for the baby." "You can choose any room you want," said Richard. "This house belongs to the whole family." "Actually, we were thinking," said Christine hesitantly. "Thinking what?" "If you wouldn't mind if we came to live here too, at least until the baby is a bit older." Richard looked at his parents, who smiled, approving the idea. "Of course we don't mind," said Richard. "It would be great. The baby would grow up near the grandparents. I could keep a close eye. Are you sure we won't be in the way?" "Christine, this house has plenty of space, and a baby needs family nearby." "Then it's decided," said Brandon. "We're going to be an even bigger family." The house quickly turned into a real home. Grace took care of the garden and the decoration. Walter set up his new workshop in the annex, much larger and better equipped than the previous ones. Richard organized a home office so he could work near the family. And Christine and Brandon settled into a suite with a closet, perfect for when the baby arrived. "Son, do you realize you've become the patriarch of the family?" said Walter to Richard one afternoon, while they were working together in the workshop. "Patriarch? Me?" "Of course. You're the one who keeps everyone together. You're the one who takes care of everyone. You're the leader of the family." Richard had never thought about that, but he realized his father was right. He had become the gravitational center around which the whole family orbited. "I like this responsibility," he said. "And you're doing very well. Your mother would be proud." "You think so?" "I'm sure. She always said you were going to be a special man, and she was right." In April, when Christine was in her 8th month of pregnancy, they received an unexpected call. It was from the hospital where Margaret, Walter's first wife, had been treated. "Mr. Walter," said the female voice on the phone, "this is the social worker from Memorial Hospital. We found some personal belongings of Mrs. Margaret Thompson in the hospital storage. Would you like to pick them up?" Walter was surprised. He had no idea that there were belongings of his first wife stored at the hospital. "What kind of belongings?" he asked. "A small suitcase with clothes and some personal items. We found them because we're doing a general cleaning of the storage. I'll pick them up. Thank you for calling." The next day, Walter and Richard went to the hospital. The suitcase was small, made of brown leather, already quite worn by time. Inside were some simple clothes, a sewing kit, and a folder with papers and photos. "Let's look at this at home," said Walter, emotional. At home, the whole family gathered to examine Margaret's belongings. There were old family photos, documents, medical prescriptions, and among everything, a sealed letter with the name Richard written on the front. "A letter for me?" asked Richard, surprised. "Your mother must have written it before she passed," said Walter, his voice choked. Richard opened the letter with trembling hands. It was in neat handwriting, characteristic of his mother. "My dear son Richard," the letter began, "if you are reading this, it's because I have already passed and you have found each other again. I always had faith that one day this would happen." Richard continued reading aloud for the family. "Son, I want you to know that I never stopped loving you. Not for a single day. The decision to leave your life was the hardest I ever made, but we thought it was best for you. You had a bright future ahead and we didn't want to be a burden. Now I realize it may have been a mistake. Family is never a burden. Family is support. But I can't go back. I can only hope that one day you will understand each other again. I took care of your father all these years, but I always knew he wasn't complete without you. He loves you more than anything in the world, even if sometimes he doesn't know how to show it. If you're reading this together, it means you've found your way back to each other. Stay united, my son. Family is the most precious thing we have. A kiss with eternal love, your mother, Margaret. When Richard finished reading, everyone was crying. It was as if Margaret were there with them, blessing the family reunion. She knew, murmured Walter. She always had faith we would reunite. And she was right, said Richard, carefully putting away the letter. Grace held Walter's hand. She's happy where she is, she said. You can be sure of that. In May, exactly on Richard's 56th birthday, Christine went into labor. She was at home when she felt the first contractions. I think the time has come, she said to Brandon, who was arranging the baby's room. The time has come? He panicked. What do we do? Calm down, said Christine, laughing at her husband's reaction. Call the doctor and get Richard. Richard was in the workshop with Walter when he received the call. Dad, we're going to be an uncle and grandfather today, he shouted, dropping everything and running into the house. The trip to the hospital was a rush. Richard drove, Walter sat in the front seat giving unnecessary instructions. Grace held Christine's hand in the back seat, and Brandon repeated the doctor's instructions over the phone. Everything will be fine, Grace told Christine. Your son will be born surrounded by so much love. At the hospital, they spent 6 hours waiting. Richard paced back and forth in the hallway. Walter tried to stay calm by reading a magazine. Grace knitted a small blanket she had started months earlier. Finally, at 7:23 p.m., Brandon came out of the delivery room with tears in his eyes and a huge smile. It's a boy, he shouted, and everything is perfect. Richard, Walter, and Grace hugged each other emotionally. Richard was officially an uncle, and on his birthday. Can I see my grandson? Walter asked Brandon. Of course, everyone come in. In the delivery room, Christine was radiant, holding a small and perfect baby. When she saw the family enter, she smiled with tears in her eyes. Everyone, I want to introduce Walter Thompson Sullivan, she said, showing the baby. Walter, murmured the grandfather, moved. In your honor, Dad, this is your namesake. Walter approached the bed, trembling with emotion. Can I hold him? Of course you can. He's your grandson. When Walter held the baby in his arms, everyone was moved. The baby opened his little eyes and seemed to look directly at his grandfather. Hello, little Walter, murmured the grandfather. I'm your grandpa, and I'm going to teach you many things, just like I taught your uncle. Richard approached and watched his nephew. He's perfect, he said with tears in his eyes. Want to hold him? Asked Christine. May I? Richard carefully took the baby as if he were made of crystal. Hi, little Walter, he said softly. I'm your Uncle Richard, and I'm going to spoil you more than any child has ever been spoiled in the history of humanity. Richard, protested Christine, laughing. I'm serious. This boy is going to be the most spoiled grandson, nephew, and great-grandson in the United States. Grace also wanted to hold the baby. What a beautiful grandma you have, Richard told the baby, watching Grace cradle her grandson. And what a big family, added Brandon. That night, back at home, the family toasted to Walter's birth and Richard's birthday. The best birthday gift ever, said Richard. And the best gift for our family too, said Walter Sr., still moved by the naming tribute. In the following months, the house was completely transformed by the baby's presence. Richard discovered he loved being an uncle. He spent hours watching his nephew, playing with him, buying little clothes and toys. You're overdoing it with the gifts, said Christine one afternoon, watching Richard arrive home with yet another bag of baby clothes. There's no such thing as overdoing it when it comes to my nephew, he replied. Richard, he's 3 months old. He doesn't need that many clothes. Yes, he does. He needs to always be well-dressed, well-groomed. He's a Thompson. He has to have style. Walter watched his son spoiling his grandson and smiled, remembering how protective he had been with Richard when he was little. Son, you're going to spoil this boy, he said. I am going to spoil him. That's what uncles are for. Grace had become a devoted grandmother. She sang to the baby, told stories, made special meals for Christine to keep up breastfeeding. This boy is going to grow up surrounded by love, she said. Love is something we don't lack in this house, agreed Brandon. When little Walter turned 6 months old, Richard organized a huge party. He rented a kids' buffet, hired entertainers, got themed decorations, a professional photographer. Richard, it's a 6-month party, not a 15th birthday, protested Christine. Every month my nephew completes deserves to be celebrated, he replied. The party was a success. Family friends came, work colleagues, company employees, the whole neighborhood. Little Walter obviously didn't understand anything about the party, but he laughed out loud when he saw the clowns. Look at that beautiful smile, said Richard, taking pictures of his nephew. He has the Thompson family smile, observed Walter Sr. He sure does. And the stubbornness too, added Grace, seeing the baby refuse the bottle he didn't want. During the party, Richard gave an emotional speech. Everyone, I want to thank you all for being here today. This party is to celebrate little Walter's 6 months, but also to celebrate something bigger, our family. He looked at Walter, Grace, Christine, and Brandon. 3 years ago, I was a lonely man, professionally successful but empty inside. Today I have a father, a mother, a sister, a brother-in-law, and a nephew. I have a complete and happy family. The audience applauded emotionally. Little Walter represents the continuation of this family. He will grow up hearing the stories of his craftsman great-grandfather. He will learn the traditional techniques. He will know he is part of a lineage of hard-working and dignified people. Walter was crying with pride. But most importantly, he will grow up knowing he is loved unconditionally by a family that found each other, got lost, and found each other again stronger than ever. When the party ended and the guests left, the family gathered in the living room to relax. What a beautiful party, brother, said Christine. Thank you for everything. No need to thank me. It's my pleasure to spoil my nephew. And spoil him you did, laughed Brandon. I think he got gifts for the next 5 years. Not the next 5 years, for the next 5 months. In 5 months I'll organize another party. Richard, everyone protested at once. He laughed at the family's reaction. I'm kidding. The next big party will be for his first birthday. That night, Richard stayed on the house balcony watching the stars and reflecting on his life. In 3 years, he had gone from a lonely businessman to a doting uncle, from a company owner to a craftsman, from a successful but empty person to a fulfilled and happy man. The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. Richard! It was Patricia from the store. Hi, Patricia, is everything okay? This is a late call. Sorry to bother you, but a very interesting offer came in and I thought you'd want to know. What offer? An American store chain wants to buy the franchise rights for Entwined Hands to sell in the United States. Richard was surprised. International franchise? Yes. They saw our line at a crafts fair in Chicago and were very interested. They want to schedule a meeting for next week. Patricia, I'll talk to my partner and get back to you tomorrow. Your partner? Oh, Mr. Walter. Of course. Richard hung up and kept thinking about the proposal. It was an incredible opportunity to expand the business internationally, but it would also mean more work, more travel, less time with the family. The next day, he talked to Walter about the proposal. International franchise? Asked his father, impressed. Yes. It would be very good for the business, but it would also be more work. And do you want to expand? Richard thought for a moment. You know, Dad, I'm not sure I want to. I'm very happy with the life we have now. I have enough money, I have a family, I have work that gives me pleasure. Why complicate things? Son, it's your decision. But remember that sometimes opportunities don't come twice. That's true. But I also remember that sometimes we lose what we have by chasing what we might have. Walter smiled at his son's wisdom. You're right. Let's stick with what we have and be happy. Then it's decided. I'll decline the proposal. Are you sure? Absolutely. Our life is perfect just the way it is. Richard called Patricia and informed her of the decision. Are you sure, Mr. Richard? It's a golden opportunity. I'm sure, Patricia. The golden opportunity is having a happy family. The rest is a consequence. That afternoon, Richard was in the workshop teaching a new technique to 2 employees when Christine appeared with little Walter in her arms. Hi, Uncle. I came to show the workshop to your nephew. What a great idea. "Come here, champ," said Richard, taking the baby. "Look, little Walter," he said, showing the tools to the baby. "One day you'll learn to use all of this. You'll be the 4th generation of artisans in the family." "4th generation?" asked Christine. "Your great-grandfather, who was Grandpa Walter's father, also worked with crafts. Grandpa told me he fixed clocks and made metal objects. So it really is a family tradition." "Yes, it is, and it will continue to be." Walter arrived at the workshop at that moment. "How's my namesake?" he asked, stroking the baby's cheek. "He's getting to know his future workplace," joked Richard. "The real future," said Walter. "I'll teach him everything I know. Just like I taught you. And I'll help," said Richard. "We'll train the most skilled artisan in Brazil." "Before training an artisan, let's let him learn to walk," laughed Christine. At that moment, Richard's phone rang. It was a number he didn't recognize. "Hello?" "Richard Harrison?" asked a female voice. "Yes, speaking." "This is Melissa Smith from Time magazine. I'm doing a story on entrepreneurs who changed their lives and would like to interview you." "What kind of story?" "About your history with your father, about how you reunited. It's a very beautiful and inspiring story." Richard looked at his father and the nephew in his arms. "You can do the interview, but on one condition." "What condition?" "I want it to be here in the workshop with my family present. The story isn't just mine. It's all of ours." "Perfect. Can we schedule it for next week?" "That works." After hanging up, Richard told the family about the interview. "Are you sure you want to share our story?" asked Walter. "I am. I think our story can inspire other families who are separated to reunite." "That's true," agreed Grace. "How many families are feuding over silly things?" "Exactly. If our story helps even one family reconcile, it will have been worth it." The interview took place the following week. Journalist Melissa came with a photographer and spent the whole afternoon at the family's home. She spoke with each one separately and then with everyone together. "It's one of the most touching stories I've ever heard," she said at the end. "You are a very special family." "We're a family that learned to value what we have," said Richard, "and that learned it's never too late to start over," added Walter. The article was published a month later under the title "The Street Vendor Who Reunited with His Millionaire Son." It took up 4 pages of the magazine, with beautiful photos of the family at the workshop at home with the baby. "The article turned out beautifully, Dad," said Grace, flipping through the magazine. "And look how many people commented on the online version," said Christine, showing her phone. "Over 1,000 comments." Richard read some comments aloud. "Moving story. It inspired me to call my father after 5 years without speaking to him. I cried reading the article. What a beautiful family. I'm going to buy jewelry from Entwined Hands to support this wonderful family." "Look at this," said Richard, continuing to read. "My family has also been estranged for years. After reading this story, I'm going to try for a reconciliation." "That's good," said Walter. "Our pain served to help other people." "That's right, Dad. Nothing we went through was in vain." In the following months, the Thompson family's story became known nationwide. They received hundreds of messages from people who were inspired to reconcile their own families. One of these messages particularly caught Richard's attention. It was from a woman from Boston. "Hello, Thompson family. I read your article and was very moved. I've been estranged from my daughter for 10 years because of inheritance issues. After reading your story, I realized how foolish it was. I'm going to look for her tomorrow. Thank you for inspiring me." "Dad, read this," said Richard, showing the message to Walter. "How beautiful, son. Our story is really helping other people." "And you know what's the most amazing thing?" said Grace. "We didn't seek this out. It happened naturally because our story is true. It's from the heart." When little Walter turned 1, Richard organized another grand party. This time, he invited some of the families who had reconciled after reading the article about them. "It's moving to see how our story inspired other people," said Richard in his party speech. "But that's not the most important thing," he continued. "The most important thing is that we learned that family is everything. Money comes and goes, professional success is temporary, but family is forever." He looked at little Walter, who was in Christine's lap, all smiles. "This little boy here will grow up knowing that. He'll know that no matter what happens in life, he will always have a family that loves him unconditionally. After the party, when everyone had left, the family gathered in the living room to relax. Little Walter slept on his great-grandfather's lap, who was softly humming the same song he had sung in the store on that special day. "Here comes the sun, after the rain, bringing light to those who wait," Walter sang softly. "It's our family song," said Richard, moved. "Our lucky song," corrected Grace. "Our reunion song," said Christine. Richard looked around the room and saw his family gathered. Walter with his grandson in his lap, Grace knitting another piece for the baby, Christine and Brandon talking quietly about future plans. 3 years earlier, he was a rich but lonely man. Today he was a rich and happy man, surrounded by the family he had always wanted. "Dad," he said to Walter, "thank you. Thank you for what, son? For having the courage to enter that store that day, for singing that song, for giving me back my family. Son, I'm the one who thanks you, for listening to me, for forgiving me, for welcoming us back into your life." "We saved each other," said Richard. "It's true," Walter agreed. "I saved you from loneliness. You saved me from poverty and sadness. And we all saved each other together," added Grace. "Because that's what family is, always saving one another whenever needed." That night, Richard went to sleep thinking about how life could change drastically from one moment to the next. A street vendor entering a store, a softly hummed song, a brooch that awakened a memory. Small details that changed everything. In the next room, he could hear Christine humming to little Walter, with the same song his great-grandfather used to sing. The family tradition continuing, passing from generation to generation. Richard smiled in the dark. His life was complete. He had family, work he loved, and purpose. He didn't need anything else, but life, as always, had other surprises in store. The next morning he received an unexpected call from an old college friend. "Richard, this is Barbara. Remember me?" "Barbara, of course I remember. How are you?" "I'm well. I saw the article about you in the magazine and was very moved by your story." "Thank you. And you? How's life?" "Complicated, actually. I'm going through a difficult divorce and needed to talk to someone. Would you have time for coffee?" Richard hesitated for a moment. It had been years since he spoke with Barbara, but she had been a great friend in college. "Of course. Where do you want to meet?" They arranged to meet the next day at a cafe in Soho. Richard arrived punctually and found Barbara at a corner table. She looked different, more mature, with a few grey strands, but still beautiful and elegant. "Richard," she stood up to greet him. "So good to see you." "You too, Barbara. You look lovely." They sat and talked about life, about the paths each had taken since college. Barbara told him about her troubled marriage, about the difficulty of starting over at 50. "It's strange to be single again after 20 years of marriage," she said. "I imagine it must be really difficult," said Richard. "And you? Never married again?" "No. After the separation from Catherine, I focused only on work, until I reunited with my family. Your story moved me deeply. It must be wonderful to have family again. It's the best thing that's happened to me in life." They talked for 2 hours. Richard realized Barbara needed a friend, someone to listen to her worries. And he enjoyed seeing her again, reminiscing about their college days. "Richard, thank you for listening," she said at the end. "I really needed to talk with someone who's known me for so long." "Any time, Barbara. We've been friends for over 30 years. Can we see each other again? As friends, obviously." "Of course, whenever you want." When Richard got home, he told his family about the meeting with Barbara. "An old friend from college," he explained. "She's going through a difficult divorce and needed to talk." "It's good that you could help," said Grace. "It's important to have friends in tough times." "What's she like?" asked Christine, curious. "Very nice. Intelligent. Successful. She's an architect. Has her own firm." "And pretty?" asked Grace with a mischievous smile. "Grace," Richard blushed. "It's a natural question, you know. You're single. She's becoming single. Mrs. Grace, we're just friends." "For now," she said, winking. Walter watched the conversation in silence, smiling at Grace's ease in matters of the heart. "Son, your stepmother is right. You need to find someone special. Dad, I already have you all. I don't need anyone else." "Richard," said Christine, "family is important, but romantic love is too. You deserve to be happy in every way." "Let's see what life has in store," said Richard, ending the conversation. But life, as always, had its own plans. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this touching story of family reunion. Do you believe Richard made the right decisions by welcoming his family back? Share your opinion in the comments with sincere words about how this story touched your heart. Leave your like if you enjoyed, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other stories that will move you.